Clara awoke. Here, drink this lotus seed soup. You need to get your strength back. She sat by my bed, her voice as soft as a feather, but her eyes held a familiar, greedy glint. I was reborn, back to the time before my artistic soul had been stolen. This was the year my career had just begun to blossom, only to hit a wall from what everyone assumed was overwork and exhaustion. They all thought my talent had dried up. Only I knew the truth. The bridal gown system connected to Serena was relentlessly stealing my inspiration and my life experience, day and night, leaving me mentally and physically drained, my abilities in freefall. In my past life, I knew nothing of this, and she bled me dry. This time, I looked at the lotus seed soup she offered and smiled coldly to myself. She thought I was still her naive, foolish little sister. I obediently took the bowl, managing a pale, dependent smile. Thank you, sister. Right in front of her, I drank every last drop of the soup, which I knew was laced with a sedative. The system was greedily hijacking my senses. She could taste the soft lotus seeds, smell the sweet fragrance of the broth, and feel the wave of relaxation and trust wash over me as I drank. Good. The more she coveted, the more she'd let her guard down. Serena, you wanted a bridal gown, didn't you? This time, I'll sew it for you with my own 2 hands. The family dinner was less a family gathering and more a victory party for Serena. She had recently wowed the art world with a piece titled 100 Birds Pay Homage to the Phoenix. The inspiration for it, of course, was stolen from me. The living room was filled with distinguished guests, including the highly respected Mr. Felix, a titan in the world of artistic embroidery. He looked at Serena, his eyes brimming with approval. Serena is a great talent. The family's legacy is in good hands. My father, Richard, was grinning from ear to ear, beaming with a pride he never seemed to have for his actual daughter. Oh, you're too kind. She still has so much to learn from masters like you. A guest named Mr. Mike immediately chimed in. Don't be so modest, Richard. Serena's Phoenix. The power, the composition. I haven't seen anything like it from the younger generation. All this praise used to be for me. Now they orbited Serena like planets around the sun, while I was left in a corner, ignored. The occasional glance I received was filled with pity and disdain. Such a shame about Clara. It looks like her spark is gone. She just doesn't have the mental fortitude. Crumbled at the first sign of trouble. I kept my head down, playing the part of the disappointed, mediocre girl they all saw. Halfway through the party, my father asked me to demonstrate what I'd been practicing lately. I shuffled reluctantly to the embroidery frame. Under everyone's gaze, I picked up a strand of priceless Dreamweave golden thread. Then, with an intentional slip of my hand, the needle's tip snapped it. The faint snap was deafening in the quiet room. Oh! I cried out in feigned panic, my eyes instantly welling up. My father's face darkened, the disappointment in his eyes like a needle in my heart. The guests let out a collective sigh of pity. Her heart's not calm, so her hands aren't steady. It seems she's really lost it. Serena immediately rushed to my side, gently taking my hand. It's okay, Clara. Don't worry, it's just one broken thread. The more considerate she appeared, the more incompetent I looked. I saw the flash of triumph in her eyes. Good. This was exactly what I wanted her to see. I let her comfort me, my sobs perfectly timed, but my gaze drifted over her shoulder to Mr. Felix. Though he had been praising Serena along with the others, I caught a flicker of something critical in his eyes as he looked at her Phoenix. It was the professional assessment of a piece that was too forceful, lacking a true, spirited grace. I knew then. I had found my first ally, or rather, my first pawn. A few days after the party, I went to visit Mr. Felix alone, under the pretext of seeking advice for my creative block. I didn't mention Serena or my troubles. I simply opened a faded antique book and pointed to a page. Mr. Felix, I was looking through my grandfather's old embroidery manuals. There's this technique, the veiled needle, but the book is so vague. I can't seem to grasp it. Mr. Felix adjusted his reading glasses and leaned in. The veiled needle was an extremely obscure technique. Its purpose was to conceal a crucial thread of chi, or life force, within a lavish piece. Done right, it brought the work to life. Done wrong, it would ruin the entire piece's flow, making it feel contrived and soulless. This was the very flaw I'd seen in Serena's phoenix. She had stolen the form of my work, but not its soul. Mr. Felix mulled it over for a moment, a sharp light in his eyes. That's a very good question. He didn't answer directly, instead turning it back on me. What do you think of Serena's phoenix? The fish was on the hook. I feigned ignorance, shaking my head. My sister's work is amazing. So much better than mine. I can't see any of the finer points. I respectfully pushed the antique book towards him. Mr. Felix, this book is too advanced for me. It's just collecting dust on my shelf. You're a true master, maybe you can find some use for it. Please, think of it as a gift. Mr. Felix ran his hand over the book's cover and gave me a long, deep look. You're a good kid. I'll accept the book. You can head home for now. I need to think. As I left, I could feel Serena watching my every move through the bridal gown system. She had heard my conversation with Mr. Felix. She had seen me give him the book. To her, I was just desperately grasping at straws, a pathetic attempt to solve my problems. She cut the connection with a sneer. She had no idea that the book not only detailed the veiled needle technique, but also contained the key to breaking another, a key that could only be deciphered by someone of my family's bloodline. Mr. Felix might not understand it, but he would certainly study it. And once he started, he would begin to have real doubts about Serena's abilities. Just then, a news alert popped up on my phone. The Embroidery Guild announced the upcoming Golden Plume exhibition for new artists. The show was about to begin. The light in Mr. Felix's study stayed on late into the night. He didn't immediately open the book I gave him. Instead, he took out a magnifying glass and re-examined a high-resolution photo of 100 birds pay homage to the phoenix on his phone. At first, he had just thought the piece was more craft than art, technically brilliant but lacking spirit. But after my question, he started focusing on the details of the needlework. The veiled needle, he murmured. He zoomed in on the image, again and again. Finally, he saw it. At the junction between the phoenix's most magnificent tail feathers and its body, several finishing stitches were jarringly abrupt. They looked like they were there purely to show off, crudely severing the flow of energy in the piece. No. This isn't the family's traditional technique, Mr. Felix muttered, his brow furrowed. The family's style was all about seamless flow and integrated spirit. These few stitches looked like they'd been clumsily grafted on from somewhere else. Only then did he pick up the book I'd given him and turn to the page on the veiled needle. The diagrams were old and faded, but the essence was clear. It was about concealing brilliance, not flaunting it. Serena's execution was the very antithesis of what the book described. There's something wrong with this Serena, Mr. Felix said, taking off his glasses and leaning back in his chair, his expression grave. He remembered my parting glance, eyes that feigned innocence but couldn't hide a deep, quiet resolve. That girl, Clara. She probably hadn't come for advice. She had come to hand him a knife. News of the Golden Plume exhibition sent ripples through the embroidery world. And Serena was naturally at the center of the storm. She didn't disappoint anyone's expectations. At a family gathering, in front of all the elders, she made a grand announcement. She would be creating a rendition of the Phoenix Ascent, one of the 10 legendary masterpieces of artistic embroidery, a work symbolizing supreme glory and skill. A collective gasp went through the room. Even my father was stunned. Serena, isn't that too risky? The Phoenix Ascent demands an almost godlike command of light and color. One small mistake, and it becomes a parody. It was a piece that could make you a legend, but it had also been the downfall of countless geniuses. Serena just smiled, confident and elegant. Father, I want to challenge myself. My sister Clara hasn't been well lately. As the older sister, it's my duty to uphold the family's honor. She even glanced at me with feigned concern. What a perfect sister, showcasing her own ambition while simultaneously putting me down. I played my part, lowering my head and clutching the hem of my clothes. My father was completely won over, his eyes filled with emotion and pride. Good, good. Spoken like a true daughter of Richard. He spared no expense, acquiring the long discontinued celestial purple silk for her, the finest material for creating the Phoenix Ascent. I remembered when I, in my past life, had worked up all my courage to ask my father if I could attempt that same piece. He had just frowned and said, "Clara, you're too impatient. Focus on the fundamentals first." But for his adopted daughter, Serena, the response was good. Spoken like a true daughter of Richard. So it wasn't that I was impatient. It was just that I wasn't the one he wanted to support. Under everyone's watchful eyes, I quietly submitted my own entry. Winter Plum Blossom. A design so simple even beginners used it for practice. When the news got out, I was nearly drowned in a tide of public opinion. The great Clara is really washed up. Winter Plum Blossom? Is she giving up? Every day, I sat diligently at my embroidery frame, stitching my plum blossoms one thread at a time. I could feel that invisible gaze, greedily watching my every move through the bridal gown system. Serena was absorbing my muscle memory, my experience, my inspiration. She thought she was the hunter hiding in the shadows, but she didn't know I was the one setting the bait. On the surface, I was embroidering plum blossoms. But in reality, with every practice stitch, I was weaving in a special catalyst stitch. The stitch itself was harmless, but it acted as an agent that created a subtle rejection of the core technique of the Phoenix Ascent, the luminous stitch. It would cause the silk's luster to develop a subtle, almost imperceptible dullness. I could see Serena in her room, mimicking my movements as she worked on her own masterpiece. She would frown, sensing something was off. But she was too arrogant, and she underestimated me too much. She dismissed the feeling of resistance as a side effect of my declining skills. And so she stole that flaw along with my inspiration. She took the poison I fed her and, stitch by stitch, worked it into her magnum opus. All I had to do was wait for the flower to bloom. On the day of the Golden Plume exhibition, the City Museum was packed. The flash of cameras and the hum of the press lit the hall as brightly as day. The air was thick with the scent of silk and the murmurs of the elite. Serena's Phoenix Ascent, the show's centerpiece, was placed in the middle of the gallery. The moment the red cloth was pulled away, a collective gasp swept the room, followed by thunderous applause. My God, the phoenix's feathers look alive. That sheen, the colors. Serena is a once-in-a-century genius. The praise washed over her in waves. Serena, dressed in a custom-made gown, stood beside her work, basking in the adoration. Her smile was poised and proud. She looked at me, her eyes filled with the pity of a victor. In contrast, my winter plum blossom was hung in the most remote corner, its cool austerity looking thin and lonely. Few people bothered to look at it. Those who did would cast a quick glance and whisper, "So that's Clara's piece. She really has lost it." Compared to her sister's Phoenix Ascent, it looks like a student's practice work. What a waste. A fallen prodigy. I heard their words, but I felt nothing. In my last life, these comments had crushed the last of my confidence. Now they were just the overture to the final judgment. My father was all smiles, hobnobbing with the other masters. He didn't even bother to look my way, as if I were the stranger in the family. Just then Mr. Felix, one of the judges, slowly approached the Phoenix Ascent. He didn't gasp or praise it like the others. Instead, he put on his reading glasses and leaned in for a closer look. The room gradually fell silent. After a long moment, Mr. Felix straightened up and let out a soft, "Hmm?" He pointed to the most brilliant part of the phoenix's tail. "Mr. Lee," he said to another judge, his brow furrowed, "come take a look at this. The piece is good, very good, but these few stitches." He paused, then uttered a few words that changed everything. "Why do they feel so stiff? As if the work is soulless." Soulless. The word dropped like a stone into a silent pond. The average person might not understand, but the top embroiderers in the room all changed their expressions. They crowded around for a better look. Mr. Lee, another judge, adjusted his glasses and frowned. "You're right, Mr. Felix. The luster is brilliant, but there's a certain dullness to it. Like oil floating on water, never quite blending in." The owner of another embroidery house whispered, "Yes, it's like a beautiful shell that's empty inside. The energy is blocked. That's a fatal flaw." The whispers, though quiet, were like needles in Serena's ears. Her face went from flushed to ghostly white. She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms, and forced a composed explanation. "I suppose my nerves got the best of me. My hand must have slipped. My apologies to the masters. It was a weak excuse. Everyone there was an expert. Nerves could affect execution, but they could never alter a piece's fundamental spirit. That was a reflection of the artist's soul. Mr. Felix gave her a long, meaningful look but said nothing more. He turned and, to everyone's surprise, walked over to my winter plum blossom. He studied it for a long time, then nodded. The technique may be simple, but the spirit is whole. It has a proud, unyielding character. Every eye in the room instantly shifted from Serena to me, filled with shock, confusion, and curiosity. Serena's face was now ashen. She glared at me, her eyes burning with venom. I met her gaze and offered her a pure, innocent smile. After the exhibition, Serena flew into a rage. She locked herself in her room at home and smashed everything she could get her hands on. For the first time, my father lost his temper with her, telling her to reflect on her actions. Meanwhile, I used needing to find peace and quiet as an excuse to gain access to the family's private library. It held a century of our family's secrets. Pretending to organize my grandfather's effects, I buried myself in the old texts. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. A yellowed journal written by my great-grandfather. The journal detailed a bitter feud between our family and the Willow family from a century ago. The Willows had once been our rivals in the world of artistic embroidery, but their last patriarch, in a desperate quest for a shortcut to mastery, abandoned traditional methods and developed a forbidden art called the soul-stealing wedding dress. Using a specially crafted gown as a medium, the art could forcibly steal another person's artistic soul and talent, especially from a blood relative. The technique defied the laws of nature and was prone to backfiring. The Willow family ultimately fell from grace because of it, wiped out in a mysterious fire, and vanished from the embroidery world. My great-grandfather had added a final note in red ink at the end of the journal. This is a wicked art. Though it can steal the form, it can never capture the spirit. The backlash will inevitably lead to madness and eternal damnation. I closed the journal, my heart completely still. So, our conflict didn't begin with this life's jealousy. It was a century-old blood feud. My eyes fell to the last page, a warning my great-grandfather had written after studying the Willow's forbidden art. He had discovered a flaw: to simulate and steal another person's most complex and intense emotions. The Willows had created a wicked technique called the soul-bind stitch. This stitch could amplify an embroiderer's emotions to their absolute peak, creating incredibly moving work. But because of this, it was like a potent poison. If the one stealing the technique did not have an iron will, they would be consumed by the emotional storm stirred by the stitch, eventually descending into madness. To steal the form is to bear its weight. A perfect trap. My next target would be the system's very core, the psychic backlash. The National Artisan Gala was announced soon after. It was the most important televised competition of the year, broadcast live to a national audience. It was a hall of glory, but also a stage for utter humiliation. I let it be known that I would be attempting a piece called Ode to the River Goddess, a work full of sorrow and disillusionment, as a way to break through my creative block. This decision was the most tempting poison I could offer Serena. I knew that with her pride and her desperate need for a shortcut, she would never allow me to make a comeback with Ode. She would do one thing: steal it. Steal my inspiration, steal my design, and she would have to do it better and faster than me. She would use the very weapon I had prepared for myself to crush me completely at the gala. I locked myself in my room, spending my days and nights designing and practicing. I deliberately incorporated the soul-bind stitch, my psychic virus. I channeled the goddess of the ode, feeling her ethereal beauty as she floated like a cloud, then plunging into her sorrowful despair. I poured this inferno of extreme emotions into the tip of my needle. Then, I left myself completely exposed, letting her steal it all. I could feel Serena, through the bridal gown system, greedily and completely absorbing my entire creative process. She thought she was getting a masterpiece of inspiration. She had no idea she was swallowing a time bomb. I never even intended to embroider the ode. I had prepared the stage for her. I had even prepared the applause. Now, all I had to do was wait for her to make a fool of herself. Serena's perspective. Clara is going to attempt Ode to the River Goddess? Pathetic. Does she really think something so complex will save her? Fine by me. This is exactly what I need. The comments from those old fools at the Golden Plume exhibition still sting like needles. Soulless. Blocked energy. What do they know? They're just jealous of my talent. This time, I'll use this ode to shut them all up for good. I can feel an unprecedented wave of inspiration flooding me through the bridal gown system. Sorrow, joy, disillusionment, love. Such complex emotions, such a sublime concept. This is the work of a true genius. Sometimes when I'm absorbing it, I feel a strange palpitation, a moment of disorientation. But that must be a normal reaction to channeling such a powerful work. It's the resonance of true talent. That loser, Clara. She's only fit to generate inspiration, not to possess it. She's like a cow, good for producing milk, but too stupid to ever taste it. And I am the one who gets to savor it. At the National Artisan Gala, I will show everyone who the real queen of embroidery is. This ode will be my masterpiece, the work that makes me a legend. Just you wait, Clara. I will use your life's blood to grind you into the dust, where you'll stay for eternity. Live at the National Artisan Gala. Under the spotlights, rows of embroidery frames stood in neat lines. My station and Serena's were right in the center. She was dressed in an ethereal, flowing gown, her makeup flawless, her eyes burning with ambition. The competition began. As expected, Serena chose Ode to the River Goddess. Her stitches were magnificent and precise. The figure of the goddess slowly took shape under her hands. The live chat was already exploding with praise. Wow, Serena is on another level. That's not humanly possible. Is that the Ode to the River Goddess? I can feel the magic through the screen. She's already won. Why are they even competing? But as the embroidery progressed, the psychic virus began to take hold. Her eyes grew hazy, and her movements became marred by tiny, erratic jerks. A fine sheen of cold sweat beaded on her forehead. The tone of the live chat started to shift. What's wrong? The goddess Serena looks really pale. Zoom in. Her hand is shaking. That expression. She doesn't look like she's creating art. She looks like she's being tortured. As she was stitching the goddess's mournful, tragic eyes, Serena suddenly let out a piercing scream. Ah! The needle in her hand plunged deep into her own fingertip. A single drop of blood instantly stained the pristine white embroidery. The entire hall was in an uproar. The camera zoomed in for a close-up. Oh my God, she's bleeding. A disaster on live TV. What's wrong with her? Did she lose her mind? In front of millions of viewers, she descended into a trance, clutching her head and shaking it violently. No, this isn't mine. This inspiration isn't mine. Her eyes widened, unfocused, as she pointed at nothing and shrieked. The willows didn't lose. I haven't lost. The name Willow echoed like a thunderclap in the silent arena. Everyone was stunned. The older embroidery masters in the audience looked horrified. And there I was, at my own frame, as if in another world. The host, seeing my work, asked in surprise, Miss Clara, "You're not embroidering the ode?" I put down my needle and spoke calmly to the camera. I know my own limits. So I chose to embroider, a mantra of serenity. I was hoping to bring a little peace to the competition. My calm against Serena's madness. My mantra of serenity against her blood-stained ode. It was the most extreme, public and damning contrast imaginable. I didn't need to say another word. Everyone could see who the real tormented soul was, the fraud who stole another's work. The on-air disaster sent an earthquake through the embroidery world. The mention of the Willow family brought back a dark, buried chapter of history. Serena's entire story was now under intense scrutiny. After the broadcast, the family was in chaos. They quickly called a press conference. My father, looking haggard and worn, spoke earnestly to the cameras. Serena has just been under too much pressure lately. She's a simple girl. Please stop the malicious speculation. The PR statement was well written, subtly implying that I, the unstable sister, was the jealous mastermind behind it all. For a moment, public opinion started to shift. People began to pity Serena, the genius driven to madness. She hid at home, refusing to see anyone under the guise of recovering. She thought the storm would blow over, that if she just stayed out of sight, it would be as if nothing had happened. She was wrong. The Embroidery Guild convened an emergency expert panel to address the controversy from the Golden Plume exhibition. The chair of the meeting was none other than Mr. Felix. The entire proceeding was streamed live. Serena's Phoenix Ascent, the piece that had brought her both glory and suspicion, was once again hung in the most prominent position. Mr. Felix got straight to the point. He had a document projected onto a screen behind him. The title read, "A Technical Analysis of Needlework and Spirit in the Phoenix Ascent." Report by Felix Gienting. Watching the live stream, my father and Serena must have felt their blood run cold. Mr. Felix pointed to a massively magnified detail on the screen. "Everyone, please look here, at the connection points on the phoenix's tail feathers. The artist used a very brilliant luminous stitch, but the finishing is extremely crude. It forcibly severs the flow of energy." He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. "After careful study with several of my colleagues, and a comparison with the family's ancestral embroidery manuals, we have concluded." He took a breath. "This is not the family's authentic technique." The room erupted. The live chat exploded. "Not the family's technique? Then what is it?" I knew something felt off. The foundation was all wrong. Mr. Felix continued. "What's more interesting is that we found traces of another stitch in this work. It acts like a catalyst, amplifying the dullness of the luminous stitch, which ultimately led to the piece feeling soulless." He looked at the camera, as if looking right at me, a hint of approval in his eyes. "And this catalyst stitch is something we've only seen in one other piece." With a wave of his hand, my Winter Plum Blossom was hung up next to Serena's work. "In Miss Clara's Winter Plum Blossom." His voice rose. "What does this tell us?" "It tells us that the creator of the Phoenix Ascent was deeply imitating, or rather stealing, the muscle memory of the artist who created Winter Plum Blossom. But her own skill was lacking. She only learned the surface, even adopting habits that were detrimental to her own piece. The hand she stole rejected the very technique she was trying to master. This is not creation. This is clumsy imitation. It is theft. Theft." The word was like a slap in the face, not just to Serena, but to our family's century-old reputation. Mr. Felix delivered his closing statement. "A true artist can lack skill, but they must never lack integrity. A so-called genius built on stolen inspiration and stolen talent is nothing more than a castle made of sand. It collapses at the slightest push. The world of artistic embroidery has no need for such a genius." The broadcast detonated a firestorm. The professional, technical report shattered Serena's prodigy persona. She went from being a tormented genius to a common thief caught in the act. I turned off the live stream and looked out the window. I could feel the hysterical, insane hatred radiating from Serena's room. Good. I wanted her stripped of her glory, with no path of retreat, before the final battle. I wanted her cornered like a desperate animal. That way, she would have no choice but to walk right into the final trap I had set for her. The National Heritage Competition. Our feud would end there. To clear her name, to prove she wasn't a thief, Serena made one last, desperate move. She announced she would compete in the National Heritage Competition, the highest level event in the country. It was her last and only chance to turn the tables. To do this, she pushed the bridal gown system to its absolute limit, attempting to drain every last drop of value from me. She had to prove she could create something even more magnificent than I could. And I submitted my final, fatal entry, a piece titled Homecoming. The core of this work was a long-lost technique, one that could only be perfectly executed by a direct descendant of my family's bloodline. The bloodline sigil. I had found it tucked away in the pages of the antique book, my great-grandfather's final gift of protection for his descendants. It could not be imitated. It could not be stolen. The atmosphere at the final competition was tense. Serena was deathly pale, with dark, heavy circles under her eyes. She looked like a gambler who had bet everything she had. The competition began. She threw all her remaining energy into her work. The embroidery was dazzling, more brilliant than anything she had ever done before. But any expert could see the madness and desperation cracking through the beautiful facade. I, on the other hand, was calm. I worked slowly, deliberately, stitching my homecoming. It was an ancient plum tree, its roots deep in the earth. Every branch, every petal, resonated with the rhythm of the bloodline sigil. As my piece neared completion, Serena's movements grew stiffer and more rigid. The system inside her was frantically trying to steal this new power, but it was being repelled by an invisible force. When I placed the final stitch in my homecoming, the bloodline sigil activated completely. It was like a perfect authenticator, and it violently rejected the stolen family soul residing within Serena. Serena let out another soul-shattering scream. Before everyone's horrified eyes, her hands seized up, turning as stiff as iron. She couldn't land a single stitch more. Then shimmering golden threads began to pour from her brow, her fingertips, her entire body. The threads of light, carrying a sound like a mournful cry of release, flew towards me, slow and certain, like weary birds returning to the forest. They all flowed into me. In that moment, I felt a wholeness I had never known. My artistic soul had come home. And Serena, like a marionette with its strings cut, collapsed to the floor, an empty shell. She was utterly broken. Feeling the creative spirit flowing through my veins once more, I slowly picked up my needle. In the corner of my work, I added one last, perfect plum blossom. This life was mine again. I raised my head and looked out at the audience. My gaze finally settled on my father, Richard. He was frozen in place, like a statue weathered by a sudden storm. His eyes darted between my glowing fingertips and Serena's empty, lifeless form on the ground. 1,000 emotions warred across his aging face. The genius he had been so proud of, the perfect creation into which he had poured all his hopes, was shattered. Completely and utterly shattered. And his own daughter, the one he had suppressed and cast aside, now bloomed like a winter plum blossom reborn from fire, radiating a light so brilliant he couldn't even look at it. With a thud, his legs gave out and he collapsed into his chair, all strength gone from his body. I saw his mouth open, as if he wanted to say something to me. An apology, perhaps. An excuse. But in the end, no words came out. Only 2 streams of bitter tears rolled silently from his regret-filled eyes. I looked away, my heart a calm, placid lake. Some mistakes, once made, can never be undone. And a father's late-arriving love is cheaper than dirt. From now on, the family's honor would be reclaimed by my own 2 hands. And it would belong to me, and me alone. The end.